want to talk with you about working with difficult people. Would you open your Bibles with me to Luke 9? And this subject, it applies, if you want to retitle it in your own notes to say living with difficult people or worshiping with difficult people, the principles apply. In fact, you'll find that conflict is a part of work life, and difficult people are here to stay. I know sometimes if it feels as if there are more difficult people on our jobs than any place else on the planet, but difficult people are everywhere. And as a good foundation, a difficult person is someone who pushes your buttons, drives you crazy, is obnoxious, high maintenance, and is generally hard to get along with. That's one view of a difficult person. Then there's another view. Difficult person could be a stickler for details. They hold us accountable to a higher level of performance, and we don't like that. And yet we can even say a difficult person is someone who's lazy, rude, or condescending. So there's a broad array of what difficult people are. And I want you to see that Jesus had his fair share. He had to deal with difficult people in the workplace. In fact, the Pharisees, that sect of Jews that felt as if they were better than everybody else, they were the crazies in Jesus' work life. In fact, they questioned his values, they questioned his character, they called him names, they said he was demon-possessed. One passage they say, you're crazy. Other times, Jesus said of them in Luke 7, verse 34, he says, you say I'm a glutton. That means I eat like a pig, and you call me a drunk. That's pretty heavy. That's publicly they're calling him names, and in some places privately. Not only did he have to deal with those kinds of difficult people, he had a team, a work team, his disciples. Some of them were really difficult. Judas was a thief. Peter was a loudmouth, opinionated fisherman. Tough guy to deal with. And then James and John, these two brothers had anger problems. In fact, at one point when Jesus was trying to get to Jerusalem and he had to go through Samaritan village, the villagers didn't allow him to stay there since he was headed towards Jerusalem. Luke 9 verse 54 tells us the response of James and John. When the disciples James and John saw this, they asked, Lord, do you want us to call fire down from heaven to destroy them? I'm just letting you see that these were individuals that were direct reports to Jesus. This is his workforce. So don't think that you're the only one that has difficult people to deal with. Jesus had to deal with them. In fact, he nicknamed these two men sons of thunder. In Mark 3 verse 17, he used that nickname just to describe these guys. See, God is well aware of the fact and very sympathetic that we have difficult people to deal with. In fact, you don't have to look far to find a difficult person to work with. Right there. Oh, I'm a difficult person to work with. You may say, why? I thought you're so lovable and nice. That's one side. Another side is that I want my stuff. I ask you, I said, how long will it take you? You said 2 weeks. Now this is 4 weeks. I still don't have my stuff. I want my stuff. I don't want to hear any excuses. I want my stuff. Men, you ought not to laugh. You should be up there too. And ladies, why are you laughing? Your picture is up there. See, you don't have to look far to find a difficult person to work with. Just look in the mirror and you'll see yourself. Now, let's focus on 4 types of difficult persons. You'll find that's what I'm going to deal with today, these 4 kinds. The pessimist. This person is a downer. It's like that pathetic-looking dog, just depressed. Nothing is good. The world is falling apart. Everything is negative. Pitiful attitude. That's a difficult person to work with because they make you want to hang yourself. He's just saying there's no hope. Then you have the manipulative person. This awful person is like a chameleon. They just turn colors. You don't know what to believe when they speak to you. It's hard to trust them because they're so deceptive. They twist the facts. They throw people under the bus. Then you find there's the bully. These people are always trying to buffalo their coworkers through their anger, through the manipulation, through intimidation, through their statements as my way or the highway or get with the program. And so they're trying to always intimidate. Then you have the arrogant. These annoying coworkers strut around like peacocks, as if they're better than you, smarter than you, look better, they're more valuable. They need to be, bowed down to. And so, great place to take a picture, by the way. So, I want you to see that these are 4 difficult kinds of people to work with. Now, you may say, well, Pastor, they don't fit the kinds I'm dealing with. The principles or the tips that I'm going to provide you will fit all kinds of difficult persons. Are you ready? Rub your hands together and say, I'm ready. Come on, I want you to be so armed that when you go to work tomorrow or the next day, or you deal with your roommate that's difficult as soon as you leave here, you want to be armed to know what to do. Tip number 1, I'm going to offer you 3 tips. Tip number 1, don't take it personal. Difficult people are everywhere. They are inescapable. Relational conflicts are a normal part of work life. You have to learn how to manage conflict. Conflict means any workplace disagreement that disrupts the flow of work. Solomon tells us in Proverbs 19, verse 11, if you are sensible, you will control your temper. When someone wrongs you, it is a great virtue to ignore it. That's pretty heavy. In other words, don't take it personal. Ignoring it doesn't mean stuff it down and get them later. I'll fix them when nobody's looking. I'm going to key their car. I'm going to cut the tires. That's not what ignore means. It means that when you're sensible, you have a high EQI, an emotional intelligence level. You are not going to let problems that may be ordinary or even just a little bit convoluted get you to the place where you're going to have an improper response emotionally. You're going to keep problems in their proper perspective. Ignore it doesn't mean that it didn't happen. Ignore it means that you are not going to give that difficult person more credit, more value than they deserve to get you all bent out of shape. You're not going to allow their words that they may have spoken to you or their actions that they may have exacted towards you to define you as a person. See, to ignore the offense, it's done by speaking quietly when they're loud and obnoxious. It's done by maintaining your cool when they're all over the place, seething with rage. It's done by you maintaining a high level of professionalism and maintaining your Christian witness when they're behaving like a fool. If I look at that verse from the New Living Translation, Proverbs 19:11 says it this way: sensible people control their temper. They earn respect by overlooking wrongs. So when you think that, I don't like the way they disrespected me, take it easy. Don't take it personal. Because the way you respond will cause their respect level for you to grow because they don't have the same level of personal composure. You have to learn, as Solomon is teaching us, you got to ignore it. Don't take it personal. Difficult people are like stand-up comedians. The more attention you give them, the more they act out. When you learn to ignore them, it's like this: no audience, no antics. No audience, no antics. Let's take a step back, by the way. I want you to get a broader perspective of the workplace. The 2016 study that was done by CPP Incorporated, that's the organization that is the publishers of the Myers-Briggs assessment tool. They studied workplace on a global level and workplace conflicts. They were able to discover that 85% of employees deal with conflicts. 85%. 29% of employees deal with conflicts almost constantly. That means 29% of you sitting here, every day there's a conflict going on in your world. Now, sometimes you got to take a step back and ask yourself this question. I know I don't like the question, but I still have to ask it. Is it me? Am I the difficult one that's causing the conflict? 9% of employees have seen workplace conflict cause projects to fail. 25% of employees have seen conflicts result in sickness or absenteeism of their coworkers. People just don't show up. They're just too bent out of shape because they've not learned this tip. Don't take it personally. This same group, CPP Incorporated, they said that on average in the United States, employees spend 2.1 hours per week involved in a workplace conflict. Can you imagine that? 2 hours per week. Translates about 12 days a year. That translates to $359 billion it causes employers to deal with conflicts. All I'm saying to you is I want you to normalize the fact that conflicts are here. You have to have good conflict resolution skills where most people don't have it. You get crazy, I get crazy. You act up, I'm acting up. You flip over a table, I flip over a bigger table. Proverbs 12 verse 16 puts it this way. Losing your temper is foolish. Ignoring an insult is smart. See, you don't know why that person behaves the way that they do. What made them so difficult, so demeaning, so arrogant, so much of a bully? Because arrogance speaks of low self-esteem. Arrogance points to their inadequacies. And so they want to just strut things and act like they're more than what they really are. Who wounded them? What happened to them? Was it an abusive parent? Was it that they are the children of alcoholics or drug addicts? Was it the fact that they may have gone through a real painful divorce that scarred them? Or 2 divorces or 3 divorces? What is it that wounded them so deeply that makes them behave the way they do? And so it's a question. Why are they so monstrous in their style? I love what Shannon Adler, an American author, says. In order to master compassion, you have to spend time getting to know monsters. When you can do that, you will see that there are no monsters. Only people that acted like monsters because no one gave them the time or compassion to hear their story. So I want you to see that when you take it personally, you don't realize they were like that before you came on the scene. You didn't cause that. You didn't make them arrogant. You didn't make them a bully. You didn't make them someone that is a downer and a pessimist. You didn't make them someone that is so difficult to deal with. You didn't do that. Don't take that credit. But what you have to learn to do is to not take it personal. I love what another American author, Steve Maraboli, says. Sometimes problems don't require a solution to solve them. Instead, they require maturity to outgrow them. You may say, what are you telling me, Pastor David? I'm telling you, grow up. Stop acting like a baby. Put on your big boy pants. Put on your big girl pants. Don't take it personal. If you mature and understand how to master conflict resolution skills and know how to deal with those things, you climb the ladder. In fact, when I throw out another stat, the CPP Incorporated, they said that 43% of managers, employees say, of their managers, they perpetuate the conflict and the job because the managers don't know what they're doing when conflict arises. And so I want you to see that you need to be able to walk in another level. And Scripture's teaching us conflict resolution skills. And one tip is don't take it personal. Don't take it personal. Tip number 2, don't play their games. Don't play their games. See, some difficult people like causing problems because to them it's a sport. I mean, I like seeing you bent out of shape. I mean, I like seeing you pulling your hair out. I like seeing you pouting in the back room. I like seeing you crying in the corner. I feel good. I made her cry. I understand that because I used to be that before Christ. I remember I took a class, it was an undergraduate class, and I just caused all kinds of trouble with the teacher. One of the men said to me, Dave, man, you got a teacher in the hallway crying. I said, because she thinks too foolishly. I said, she has transductive reasoning, specific to specific. Sky is blue, let me put on my red coat. No correlation. Now, when I look back, it was my own immaturity. It was my own game playing. And so I realized that there's some people, they love to play games. But if you are going to know how to work with difficult people, you have to understand this tip. Don't play their games. How did Jesus handle it? In Matthew 28 or Matthew 22 verse 18, let me bring you right into Jesus' difficulty with the Pharisees. Jesus knew that they were up to no good. That is the Pharisees. That strict sect of Jewish folks. He said, why are you playing these games with me? Why are you trying to trap me? Do you have a coin? Let me see it. They handed him a silver piece. This engraving, who does it look like? And whose name is on it? They said, Caesar. Then give Caesar what is his, and give God what is his. The Pharisees were speechless. They went off shaking their heads. In other words, Jesus is saying, look, I'm not going to play your games. See, Jesus didn't allow the game playing of the Pharisees to get him emotionally frazzled, to get him angry, to get him to react, in some negative way, or to get him to get off of his focus. I want you to see the significance of how Jesus dealt with it. Now, you have to learn how to avoid game playing. There's some things you have to stop doing, and there are other things you have to start doing. Stop and start. Because you may not even realize you're playing games and you're getting involved in their game playing. Here's what you do. Stop controlling, start managing. Most of us want to be in control, myself included. It feels weird when you're not in control. But you can't control people. You can't, just like you can't herd cats. You ever try to herd cats? You can't herd them. Same way you can't control people. You're trying to control people on a job. They better do it this way. You better do it this way. I better do it this. You can be as nasty as you want, but people are not going to be controlled. What you can do is influence. What you can do is manage, guide, suggest, direct. You have to stop reacting and start resolving. Reacting is when Jesus could say, who do you guys think you are? You guys playing games. Oh, you're idiots. Jesus could have, Lord, he could say, God, send fire down. Or where are the sons of thunder when you need them? He could have done any of those things. Jesus didn't do that. He didn't react. That's not his method. Nor did he control where he tried to change the Pharisees. No, he resolved. He said, let's look at this. Whose coin is this? Whose inscription is on it? Caesar's, they said. Well, give to Caesar's what's his. Give to God's what's his. Resolved. One woman called her husband up and said, honey, she started whispering on the other side, on the other end of the phone, I'm going to put in my 2 weeks notice. He said, what's wrong? She said, I'm sick of my supervisor. He's so hard. He's so demanding. He's just unrelenting. He speaks to me meanly and harshly. And he wants me to always walk to my coworker's desk and have meetings. And my feet are hurting. And my illness. And he says, don't put in your notice. When you come home tonight, we'll chat. She comes home. And he says, let's try to come to a solution. What's the issue? She said, I think he's too demanding. I don't like the way he deals with me. He's always asking me. My feet are killing me. You know the disease. He said, why don't you go to the doctor and get a note? She goes to her medical doctor, has him write out a note describing her sickness. Then the doctor prints out some detail as to what happens when her sickness flares up and how it affects her ability to walk. So she set up a meeting with the HR person and her boss. The three of them sat down, and she said, before we get going, I'd like you just to give me 5 minutes of your undivided attention, and then I'll sit back and be quiet. She distributed the documents to the HR, to the boss, and said, I am not being difficult when I say I don't want to walk to my coworkers' stations to have the group meeting and team meeting. I'm just in pain. My doctor wrote a note to describe to you my illness because maybe I'm not being clear. And this is detailed. When her boss read it, all of a sudden he had compassion for her. The HR person also had compassion. Before they thought she was just a problem person. And then the boss said, we'll be sensitive. Whenever that happens and you're not able to walk to these meetings, I'll realize that and I'll give you grace or I'll give you deference. But when that happened, can we have the meeting in your station? She said, that's fine. They came to a happy medium. Why? Because she stopped reacting and started resolving. There are things you have to stop and start. Stop being distracted and start being focused. Jesus didn't allow the distractions of the Pharisees to pull him off course. He could have said, look, forget the cross. Let me just take care of these guys first. He kept the main thing. You need to realize, why are you there on that job? Why are they paying you? What did they task you to do? Stop being distracted and start being focused. And may I suggest this other point? Stop gossiping and start praying. Now, gossiping, it may make you feel closer to the people that you gossip with, but it's very, very detrimental. In fact, amidst the bad sins that God lists in Romans chapter 1, debauchery, group sex and all kinds of stuff, gossip is right there among it. This thing is very bad. And the reason why it's very bad is because it fragments and breaks up social connections and all the socialization and community that's necessary to build teams and a healthy society. God says, don't do that. In fact, in England, some 35% of people attribute workplace conflict to gossiping. They say, I have a problem at work because they're gossiping about me. You have to see that instead of gossiping, start praying about that person. I've discovered over the years that anybody you pray about, you can't speak badly about them because you're praying to God about them. Start praying. Now, don't pray the imprecatory psalms. Fancy theological word that, David said, God send fire down, break out their teeth, like Psalm 2. That's called the imprecatory psalm. That's not what you pray. You pray, God, give them grace. Help me to understand them. Help me to be able to know how to not take it personal. Give me strategy as to navigate the waters that are murky when their difficulty flares up. That's how you pray. Don't succumb to their argument. I love what this source said that I wasn't able to find the author to credit him. He says, I don't have to attend every argument I'm invited to. You got to learn that. You don't need to just say, I'll pass on that one. I'll pass on that one. See, you have to understand, you don't need to get involved. They get crazy, I get crazy. And then you start saying, well, they think that because of this suit that I don't know. Look, I grew up in the hood. I'll just take the jacket off. Let's go out in the parking lot. We'll take care of this now. No. Don't lose your Christian witness. Wave at me if you're still with me. Good. I've given you 2 tips already. You got the 2 tips. Now I want to give you the 3rd tip. Don't join the crazies. Who are the crazies? The pessimists, the manipulative, the bullies, the arrogance, or whatever descriptor you have for the crazies in your world. And the reason why I said that is because Paul challenges us to integrate faith into our work life. As a Christian, how do I function in the workplace? How do I function in the marketplace as a Christian? How do I take God with me to work? How do I take my values with me to work? How do I take my values with me to whatever the kind of work is that I do? Whether a bus driver or a playwright, how do I take my values with me to work? Colossians 3 verse 13 says, make allowance for each other's faults and forgive anyone who offends you. Remember, the Lord forgave you, so you must forgive others. Now this verse, I want to spread it into two areas and address it because it's very, very rich. First part, make allowance for each other's faults and forgive anyone who offends you. Part A. Paul is telling us, take a step back and have a bigger picture of why you work. Your work is your vocation. That word vocation, it originates, the etymology or the historical foundation of the word comes from the Latin word vocare, which means to call. So when you go to work, see yourself as someone who's called by God. All of a sudden, when I have a perspective that when I go to work, this is not just for me to get money to pay my bills, to take care of my family, to put my kids through school. It's more than that. I am here because God called me. All of a sudden, my perspective is now broader. It's no longer me versus you. It's no longer about me, my career, my growth, my advancement, my climbing the corporate ladder, my getting a bonus, my getting a promotion. It's not about individualism any longer. It's about community. And here in America, we struggle with this whole notion thinking that individualism is supreme. It's all about me. Paul is saying, wait a second here. Make allowance for each other's faults. In other words, cut them some slack. It's not about you. Don't become myopic. Don't become so short-sighted where you get consumed with individualism. It's not about you. It's about us. It's not about you getting better and you climbing the corporate ladder. It's about us as a corporation thriving. It's about us as a community flourishing. It's about us as a people fulfilling our potential. It's not about you. And when you think it's about you, you get it all twisted, and then you're just like the crazies because you think it's about you. So Paul was helping us to understand this is a calling. Therefore, there's no distinction between sacred and secular. Don't fall into that trap, because then you're going to think that it's only what I do in the church, with the church, through the church, that's sacred. God blesses. But Monday through Friday, my work world, and assuming you work Monday through Friday, if you have other days, you throw them in, that's not secular. That's equally sacred, because God's called you. There's no higher calling of a minister versus an accountant, a preacher versus, someone that may be a chemist, someone who's a man of the cloth versus someone who's an administrative assistant. One's not sacred and the other secular. No, they're both sacred. Why? Because God vocare you, Latin word, He called you. That's what Paul was trying to drive home in that first part of that verse. He was as if he was reaching back to Psalm 147 and verse 13, where it has this little phrase buried in it that is so powerful. It says, God makes your city gates strong. And when you think about that, God makes your city gates strong. In other words, secures your city, runs your city, operates your city smoothly. He's not talking about homeland security per se. He's talking about every single profession that helps to make the city strong, vibrant, flourishing, and well organized. And Martin Luther, the great German reformer, says that our work really is the fingers of God helping to make the city gates strong. So if you pump gas for drivers going to work, don't look at yourself as some mere gas attendant. No, you are helping to make the city gates strong because you're giving people gas so they can get to work, they can be a medical doctor, fulfill the surgical requirements as a surgeon, or they're an educator, they are teaching children. And so you are also should walk with pride and with some self-esteem that's high. Why? Because you're the fingers of God helping to make the city gates strong. If you design IT systems, provide good service, you're the fingers of God to make the city gates strong. You make sandwiches at the deli. Don't look down your nose and don't let anybody else look down their nose at you, because you are the fingers of God giving people food and nutrients so they can go to work and do what they do. Why? To make the city gates strong. I want you to have a sacred view of your profession. No matter how simple or how complex, no matter where it stands in terms of economic range, you are the fingers of God to make the city gates strong. Therefore, when you have that high view of work, you can't go to work and always be fighting with people and letting conflicts drag you into it. You don't join the crazies. You're not an individualistic thinker. That's not how you roll. You roll as a communal being, as a societal being, as a global person. So when you look at work, you have a high view of work. My work is sacred. My calling is sacred. I don't care what I'm doing, photocopying, or I'm someone sweeping the floor, or someone who's doing surgery as a surgeon. I want you to have a high view of work. You're the fingers of God to help make city gates strong. Therefore, you won't be sullied by being crazy and individualistic, fighting with everybody and letting everybody suck you into crazy nonsense. That's not who you are. You're higher than that. So the apostle is giving us a view that is so other than. So other than. You don't have to join the crazies. I was in a small airport in Pennsylvania several years ago. One of those small airports that just small planes, maybe tops 50 people could sit on the plane. And this plane that was coming to, our plane was late. And we're sitting there, some reading books, some reading newspapers, some on their cell phones. And this one guy, little guy, he's shorter than me, and he just blew it. You can tell he was one of those difficult persons because he just snapped just like that. And he went from 0 to 10 in a second. He's sitting there, everything was normal. Then he went up to the attendant who was there for the airlines, and he started yelling loud. People could hear. I demand, where is this plane? I'm sick of this. I want this plane here now. So he's bullied, difficult. Just, you can see he's crazy. He got crazy. He was looking so sane before. And all of a sudden, crazy came out. And so the attendant was so quiet and so calm, so professional. She said, sir, we're doing everything that we can possibly do. A flight crew will be here. It'll probably about another 45 minutes. Please, just relax and everything. I'm not going to relax. I demand to talk to your attorney right now. Send your attorney from upstairs down here right now. Now I'm sitting there, I'm watching all of this unfold. I knew when I walked into the airport, there was only one floor. It was one of those floors. Those airports had one floor. He's saying, send your attorney from upstairs. And I'm thinking, I can't help myself. I've got to laugh. I said, there is no upstairs. I'm saying, there's no upstairs. Send your attorney down here now. I'm thinking, there's nobody up there. But the idea was that this woman, she didn't join the crazies. Neither do you. I said I was going to look at Colossians 3:13 in two parts. Now I want to look at the second part. So I'll bring that verse again to your attention. Colossians 3:13, Paul says, make allowance for each other's faults and forgive anyone who offends you. Anyone. Remember, the Lord forgave you, so you must forgive others. I love how Paul gives me a perspective. He says to me, cut people some slack because God forgave you. He reaches back into my past and says there was a time and place when you experienced the great forgiveness. All of your sins were forgiven. You were changed from the inside out, where you became a new creation. The old David Ireland has been gone. A brand new David Ireland surfaced. Paul says, I want you to behave in light of that experience. If you've really been changed and experienced a great forgiveness, then you will not join the crazies, because crazies are like that because they're walking around junked up inside with all the baggage, maybe from their childhood, baggage from broken relationships, baggage from being damaged on prior jobs. And they have not forgiven those employers, forgiven those individuals, forgiven their maybe ex-spouse, forgiven their parents. And so they walk around with all this baggage junked up. And so it's all locked up. It's almost like a body of water that's stagnant. It's a perfect breeding ground for mosquitoes. And Paul is teaching us, don't let your heart become stagnant and junked up, because it's a perfect breeding ground for being crazy. The crazies have not released people. Forgive means to set free, to let go. If you don't forgive people, resentment sets in. Resentment is like you nursing this wound, and you just have ill will towards people. Nelson Mandela said this: resentment is like drinking poison and then hoping it will kill your enemies. It kills you. So I want you to see that practicing forgiveness, it comes from remembering the great forgiveness that God established for you in Christ Jesus. And if you've never experienced that great forgiveness, I'm not talking about being religious. I'm not talking about having a quick moment to say, Lord, forgive me. I'm talking about you saying, God, I don't want to be who I am. I don't want to be who I used to be. I want to be a brand new person. I need the forgiveness that comes from serving you. Give me that great forgiveness. When that happens, it orients your perspective about your coworkers that are difficult, and even the easy ones, the ones who are easy to get along with. I love what C.S. Lewis, the great English philosopher, said. God loves the other person in spite of his faults, and he goes on loving that difficult person. Whereas we reject the person, build a wall, and want to walk away from that miserable individual. I want you to see what happens when you have been a recipient of this great forgiveness. You can then be able to say, God, teach me how to be godly in the workplace. It's not by walking around a big Bible and waving it. No, it's by living a godly life and letting that life wave. And when that happens, you can never be a part of the crazies, because they have no hold on you, because you are realizing the high value of work and the high holy calling to work. And you're also realizing that the great forgiveness in Christ, I'm a recipient of that. Therefore, it's like someone that I owe $5 billion to has forgiven me. And then I go after someone who owes me $5 and I try to jack him up. I can't. Great forgiveness, God has forgiven you of every sin that you've ever committed. You can't hold a grudge or resentment towards someone who may have been difficult towards you and offended you. No matter how grave that offense is, it's like them owing you $5 and you have been forgiven of $5 billion and you still trying to tell them, give me my $5. Our God puts everything in perspective. I just wanted to offer you today 3 little tips as to how to work with difficult people. Let's stand together.